Western psychology has more or less taken the attitude that it is essential to the psychic integration of Western man for him to be under a condition of more or less constant tension. It is assumed that without pressure, the individual will fall apart. We are held together by not only the pressures of our own personalities, but the pressures of our desires, our ambitions, and our attitudes. It is taken for granted that if the individual was not constantly striving after something, he would vegetate. He would cease to develop the resources which we like to associate with the dynamic personality. We like to point out also that Western civilization is a monument to the accomplishment of pressures. If it had not been for a constant pattern of affliction, war, strife, the pressure of situations and circumstances, it is assumed that we would all be back in the Stone Age. Well, we can build a pretty strong case for pressure. We can build a great deal to support the idea that the ambitious man forges ahead in the world, and the person without ambition seldom, if ever, gets too far in the battle of life. Up to very recently, we could philosophize about all these problems. We could say of pressure that we can take it or leave it. But by degrees, many of the beliefs that we have held to be the basic truths of society have been shattered by circumstances which have demonstrated that there is something basically wrong with the concept of the pressured life. The individual may seemingly get a little further under extreme pressure, but he is a little like the old-fashioned horse that was attached to the beer truck back in those good old days of cobblestones and great dray horses pulling huge loads. And very often the load was more than the horse could take. So the driver would lash out with his whip and beat the horse unmercifully. And in a desperate effort to escape further flogging, the horse would maybe get to the top of the difficult hill. And the driver was quite convinced that that's the way to treat a horse. But of course the horse didn't last very long. Very shortly the horse was through as far as its usefulness was concerned, to say nothing of the unfair and terrible damage which we inflicted upon another living thing. There is no gain that we can learn that is permanent or valuable that arises from beating oneself beyond a certain rather limited degree. We are not supposed to be lazy, but we are not supposed to live constantly under tension. The Western man has tried this long enough. And incidentally, he has contributed a great deal to the tension of all other peoples and nations. Probably a good part of the world would be happier than it is today if there had never been a Western civilization, because it was so geared to ambition, to conquest, to the extension of commerce and industry, to the rather ruthless colonization of primitive peoples. But this vast program of success at all costs has not only complicated our lives, but hangs heavy over us at the moment, as other nations are beginning to reach that degree of strength in which they can show their resentment for the ill treatment that Western peoples have given them in the past. So I think about all that this unreasonable ambition has resulted in is sickness, death, and hate. It has brought with it very little that we can say has truly advanced the course of our destiny. But we have created our own patterns of what we consider to be advancement. And we are still struggling with the idea that the more contrivances we can get into orbit, the more advanced we are. Actually, one of these days, the traffic congestion up there will be worse than it is here. And still we will not be very advanced, because this has nothing to do with essential progress. In the East, men have tried to solve this pressure problem. They've had pressures too, probably not nearly as great as ours, nor as continuous. But they've had to work with the pressure problem, and it has become more essential as a problem ever since the East and West began to mingle their resources. Zen takes the attitude that pressure is not in any basic sense the key to success. Pressure is an individual bestowing upon himself a powerful stimulant, which is not really a tonic or a food, but merely a stimulation. The ambitions of Western peoples are not advancing the total character of the individual or the total good of Western culture. These ambitions are simply false stimulants. They are stimulants which cause the individual to develop all kinds of strange personality defects, very much as extreme alcoholism not only weakens character but reveals inherent weaknesses to a most unfortunate degree. So we have to begin to estimate the difference between strength and mere inebriation or stimulation of a false nature. Zen takes the ground that the only way in which you can accomplish a great deal without hurting yourself and without hurting other people is to move from a kind of effortlessness within yourself. The moment you become dramatically aggressive, you also become offensive. The aggressive person is hurting other people, interfering with their rights, damaging their prospects, and to a measure annoying them and destroying their peace of mind. It is not on such a ground of mutual annoyances that progress can be achieved. And what appears to be progress, again, is only a kind of acidity, a psychic toxin, which is mistaken for a legitimate vitality. You can intoxicate a structure, particularly glandular, in the human body, and make it seem to work more rapidly and more successfully than is really the case. But this so-called overfunction is not a proof of strength, but a proof of the weakness of the gland, which is showing a kind of toxic exhaustion and is not actually in a healthy state at all. Zen would like to take the ground that man's success in life is due to the conservation of resources and not the abandonment of self to an energy outburst. Energy is the thing upon which all must be motivated, or by which it must be fueled. Man's supply of energy is therefore really the most priceless thing that he has. As he wastes energy, he begins to experience the lack of it and finds exhaustion, fatigue creeping in on him. He finds that his interests in life become less keen, and little by little From lack of energy, all purpose collapses as far as his psychology is concerned. So we have to conserve energy. On the Western side of things, we measure achievement by energy expenditure. If we put a pound of energy behind something, then we have a pound of achievement. If we put 100 pounds of energy, we have 100 pounds of achievement. It's all energy. We think of the amount of stress as indicating the activity of the individual. This activity, however, may be nothing more than a kind of meaningless confusion. In the Zen thinking, energy must be conserved. The problem is to achieve the greatest amount of result with the least expenditure of energy. We know, for example, in the old days when the American Indian runners carried messages across this country, that it was necessary for them to achieve a certain pacing. They still do it in the reservations of the Southwest. An American Indian can take a kind of dog trot. He will go no faster and no slower. And on this trotting pace, he can accomplish a prodigious amount of travel. He can go for hours, apparently, without fatigue. He can outdistance those who run and hasten and hurry by just keeping up this peculiar rhythmic trot. He has learned just exactly how rapidly this trot should be geared so far as he is concerned. It differs with everyone. He knows his pace, he keeps it. And there are cases where Indians have kept this trot without really pausing at all for 12, 14, 16 hours. Had they hurried, they could not possibly have done it. Their brother in the East, the old rickshaw driver who has now disappeared, had this same prodigious power. Behind the staffs of his rickshaw, between them more likely, he was able to go on for hours at this dog trot. I remember many years ago, when there were still rickshaws in the area, a rickshaw driver who made a 40-mile round trip without stopping, dragging a load. But he would never go beyond a certain speed. He would never hurry. He would go along with a strange rhythmic trot. He was conserving energy. Now in Zen, this idea is carried a step further. Every ounce of energy that we possess must be used. It must be used as wisely and sparingly as possible. Nature reconstructs our energy patterns to some degree, but if we exhaust them too much, nature cannot revive or replace this wasted energy as rapidly as we waste it. As a result, over a long period of time, our vital resources gradually decline. If, however, at all times in life, we try to use energy to the utmost, getting from every unit of energy all of the true usefulness that is possible, we will find that nature has rather wonderfully provided us with the fuel of life, by means of which we can accomplish most of the reasonable things that we desire. It will be obvious that work of all kinds is energy consuming. But today, work is far less a problem for Western man than at any other time in history. But as his hours shorten, it seems that his capacity shortens. The individual psychologically is more tired now after 7 days with 5 coffee breaks than he used to be when he worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. If he had to do the work that his grandfather did, he probably would collapse in his tracks. So what has he accomplished since the time of his grandfather? He has accomplished inability. He has accomplished the mysterious circumstance of not being able to do what his own forefathers did. Now, the answer was not merely that grandfather had better stamina. It was that grandfather was a better organized person. Now, this might not have been grandfather's fault. He may not have known very much about being a better organized anybody. But he had one advantage: simplicity. His needs were simple, his expectations were simple, the world that he lived in was rather non-competitive in comparison to today. His life was free from most of the extraordinary ambitions that affect modern man. He was also not so much of a conspirator as his descendants. He wasn't doing everything he possibly could with his emotional and mental resources to fight his way to the top, even by unfair means. This grandfather, with a simpler way of life, probably healthier food, fewer ambitions, and no great demands upon life or unreasonable luxuries, lived to a good old age under fair opportunity and conserved energy resources. We see a few of these people now. I've known a number of them along the way. I've known many persons who have reached 90 with every tooth in their heads. Some of them with hardly a filling. I had a grandmother who died at 70. She'd never had a filling in a tooth. These people just live differently. Today, by the time we are 65, we've shaken all our teeth loose with worry and fear. Our digestion is so bad that acidity has eaten up our mouths. And we are just unhappy due to pressures that our ancestors never knew. What is the best way to handle this type of thing? We can't go backwards. We don't want to. We don't want to go back to the 12-hour day. But what we do want to do is to go backward or forward, or whatever is necessary, to a condition in which, as individuals, we are sufficient to our own needs as human beings. That we can live with ourselves. That we can use our energy allotments constructively and reasonably. And will not waste the larger part of this allotment that is given to us. Tests have been made, others undoubtedly are in the making at the moment, to determine exactly how we use energy and what happens when we short-circuit our own systems. And every bit of information that has accumulated up to now straight forth tells us the facts of the matter. Actually, emotional and mental stress today work a greater hardship upon our economy as persons than the 12-hour day did upon the lives of our ancestors. Our great-grandfather, perhaps, who went out and plowed a field from morning till night with a rifle strung over his shoulder, he had a difficult life. He even had a life which might have encouraged considerable neurosis. But he also had about him certain values that helped to simplify things for him. One thing he had was faith. He believed in the simple facts of his religion. May have been a little narrow, but what he believed, he tried to live. He also believed in himself. He believed in his family. He believed in the importance of clearing that back 40 acres of stumps and old broken down dead trees in order that his sons might have farms when they grew up. And pretty soon his sons were out there helping him clear the land. This was a different kind of world. It was a world in which there was very much less neurosis than there is today. Simply because people had plans, programs, simple projects, and stayed with them. So our Zen teaching says, let's start by saving energy. Let's save energy by having a program. Never wake up in the morning for a day which you are going to approach as you might by firing both barrels of a shotgun and hoping to hit something. The day has a reason and a purpose. If you have no idea what you are going to do with it, then you might as well settle down quietly for a little while before the day gets well underway and decide what you're going to do with it. A day that is meaningless, a day that is purposeless, is just an energy waster. And where energy is wasted in this way, nearly always consequences are set in motion that demand more energy to repair damage. We cannot have a meaningless day without something coming along by which we hurt ourselves. If this meaningless day really was nothing, it wouldn't be quite so bad. But this meaningless day made through boredom lead us to extravagance that is desperately dangerous to us. So we can't afford this kind of a day. We have to have some reason for getting up in the morning. Now, we have reasons in the West for getting up. One is the job. It means that we got to drag ourselves out and get down to the old office or factory or something of that nature on time or ever a pay docked. This is called the incentive system. But no one seems to be very much thrilled by it. Actually, the job has to be done. We have to pay the bills of life. There's no doubt about it. But an individual whose life is only a job is missing a great deal of something. The individual whose life is not only just a job, but just a job which he resents. A job in which he finds no satisfaction, but simply a monotonous repetition of an assigned task for no purpose. Well, perhaps there is a purpose. Man has a family. He is duty-bound to do what he can to support and advance the state of that family. So he must work to make sure that these others have what they need. But today the work program is such that if the individual takes all negative emotion out of it, takes all boredom and resentment out of it, frees himself from the self-pity angle of the job, like the man who says, I work all day and earn the money. I don't even get a dime out of it myself. It all goes to the family. This is self-pity. And while this remains as the psychology of life for that individual, self-pity can end only in a pitiful state for him. So whatever we are doing with this problem of daily survival, we've got to think it through, organize it, and get the acidity out of it. If it's a job that needs doing, then it has to be done. And all regrets, all evasions, all excuses, and all flag waving, and all revolutions have nothing to do with the simple fact that if we have a responsibility, we have to meet it. If we have bills, we have to pay them. Now, the moment we begin to stop thinking in this direct way, we start running up bills we can't pay and begin the old song that the world owes us a living or something of that nature and go from bad to worse. The simple answer is when you get up in the morning, plan your day and understand your day, realizing that this day must in many ways be a day of acceptances. You are committed by yesterday to many things, and today you will commit tomorrow to some things. This is not bad, but if you do it, face it, accept it, and carry the responsibilities that you yourself have voluntarily assumed. When you get through with the basic pattern of the day, the day's responsibilities, then what have you planned? What have you done to solve the problem? Well, you say by the time the day is over, there's not much you can do. I'm worn out. Responsibilities have cut me down. Barely have strength enough to get back home and turn on the television. If that doesn't wear you down, you're really a massive character. But actually, experiment has shown, under very careful test situations, that a person coming home from work is exactly like a child in the various grade rooms of a school. The individual who comes back from work is not tired, except in a very few cases. Maybe 10% of workers are physically tired. The other 90% are bored to distraction, worn out, complaining, fussing, frustrated, neurotic, but not tired. The exhaustion is psychic fatigue. They have sold themselves to the fact that they are worn down to a frazzle. They're worn out simply because it is the only way in which they can excuse the fact that as personal beings, they have no lives. An individual doesn't like to come home to himself or anyone else and say, well, I've done my shift in the office, and I'm now coming home and I'm going to fall apart because there's absolutely nothing here that means anything to me. I don't find any pleasure in my home. I find nothing stimulating in it. I find no reason to be glad I'm here. So fortunately, I'm worn out and I can go to sleep. This is just an excuse mechanism within the person himself. While he's all quiet there, ready to collapse from his fatigue mechanism, the doorbell rings, and a visitor comes in who he's very glad to see. Within a few moments, he's forgotten that he's tired, and they're chatting along and having a perfectly grand time. His fatigue is gone, because his fatigue was nothing but boredom with himself. In the same general way, children, having gone through several hours of schooling, are fatigued in certain faculties of the mind. Give them something else to do, they're not fatigued. You tell the child that is all tired out learning reading, writing, and arithmetic, and there are not many that are so fatigued at that these days. Well, anyway, presume that they are. Tell them that there's going to be a good tennis game or a swimming match or something. They'll have strength enough to go on with it. And after one of those horrible days of examinations in school when they're just worn to a frazzle, they can still dance all night. Why? Because energy follows interest. And nearly every individual who is chronically tired is simply chronically bored. Now, there are exceptions, of course, if the person is physically sick. If there's some desperate impairment to vitality, if some ailment is eating into the resources, or if the person is one of that small percentage who is legitimately worn out, all that we say does not apply to them. But it does apply to the average person. It applies even to the person who thinks they're pretty busy. You will find, if you look into your own life, that you are seldom so tired that you cannot do what you really want to do. You are so tired you can hardly drag one foot in front of the other. But the newspaper says it is a month-end sale with rare bargains. Suddenly your energy enables you to go downtown and fight in a store for 8 hours, being trampled on and trampling on, in the hope of saving $1.16. Your energy comes back. It comes back because it follows interest. It follows the mind. The main point we'd like to make is that energy resources are turned on and off by the mind. But when the mind says, I'm weary, then we are really tired. When the mind decides it's made a slight error of judgment and we're not as tired as we thought we were, and we can still go out and have a pleasant time with our friends, then we find that we can do all of these things. Modern man in Western world is not so physically fatigued that he cannot do nearly anything that he wants to do. But more and more in this generation, he does not want to do anything. He's slowly turning down the wick of his own lamp. He seems almost bent on a slow suicide. He wishes to completely destroy himself. He wishes to surround himself with hopelessness and helplessness. If you ask him, he will deny it. But watch him, and you will see him prove it day after day. Now, why should a person do this? Why should an individual who has a good job and a fairly satisfactory marriage, good children, fair prospects for a future, a good education themselves, why should this individual want to turn down the energy supply until finally they snuff themselves out? The only possible answer to this is some kind of internal frustration, fear, boredom, helplessness, or a feeling of total individual or collective futility. Why should a person today, who has so many advantages and privileges, have so very little interest in being energetic, in using energy constructively? I think one answer is the general situation of his world. Nothing seems to be very right. The future looks very dangerous. There seems very small chance of peace, of friendship, of brotherhood in the world. It looks as though we might all be on the verge of some strange, mysterious catastrophe. The individual cannot plan with securities. He cannot do what men did even 2 generations ago. I remember growing up in New York. You got a job, one of the brokerage houses or insurance houses, or one of the Wall Street castles that stood in those days. You were a young man in your late teens, maybe. You went in with your best suit on, creases pressed out of your pants. You received an indoctrination for the president. Maybe the only time you ever saw him, but you saw him then. And he told you very simply that you were going to work for a great and wonderful corporation, one of high honor and great integrity. And he said very simply, be honest, do your job well, you will get ahead in the business, and if you're faithful to us, you will never have to worry again as long as you live about a job. You will have one until you retire. When you retire, they'll give you a grandfather's clock thrown in. There was no problem. There was no one chiseling for your job. There was no one waiting desperately to make sure that you didn't succeed. If you did your work, you could relax. You had your job. You had to fail the job, or the job would not fail you. And generation after generation of American business people lived by that. Now it's all gone. No one's secure in these things anymore. And where there is no security, there's no planning, there's no building, we have this dangerous situation of losing interest in tomorrow, losing interest in trying to build a pattern of purpose. And I think Western man today is terribly frustrated because he cannot build a plan. He cannot save with any sense of security. He cannot invest with any sense of security. He cannot build for tomorrow with any real confidence that tomorrow will be the fulfillment of the plan he is setting in motion. Lacking all of these securities, he has lost long-range thinking, long-range judgment. He has tried to live it up immediately because he didn't know what tomorrow would ever bring with it. This type of desperation is another way of wasting energy. And you come to a series of pretty solid statements. It takes a certain amount of energy to shovel dirt. It takes a certain amount of energy to work a great machine or pound a typewriter. Everything takes a certain amount of energy. But it takes infinitely more energy to fight personality conflicts than it does in any other form of activity in which we indulge. A good worrier in a few hours can use up more energy than would be necessary for him to get out and solve the problem he's worrying about. Grief tears down energy far more rapidly than the human system can build it back. We are all subject to grief. Nature will take care of grief for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even 6 months. Because nature expects this grief to gradually clear, and it usually does. But when an individual settles down to nurse a grief, building psychological fortification to this grief until gradually it possesses them, so that they settle down to be professional grievers over a lifetime. Nature cannot fight this. Nature cannot restore this wasted energy. And the individual gradually becomes ill in some one of many parts of his life. He loses his energy supply. He is exhausted. He is worn out. And for lack of energy, the body functions begin to go. And when the various vital organs are de-energized by waste, serious illness is not far off. Hates use up more energy than any amount of physical life and its problem that we ever have to face. The individual who grumbles about being tired from 8 hours of work doesn't realize that 1 hour of hate takes more energy than 8 hours of work. He is wearing himself out. He is destroying himself by his own emotional and mental attitude. So one of the reasons why people lose love of life and lose the vim to live, lose gaiety of spirit, is because more and more we are catering to neurotic attitudes. And these attitudes are nothing but energy wasters. They tear us down, they deplete us, and they finally leave us open to most any physical ailment that may come along. There's no need for us to permit this, but we do. So we tell people these things. We say to the individual, you have a very bad jealous streak in you. This jealousy is just as dangerous as a very dangerous bacteria. This jealousy can do you just as much harm in the long run as almost any physical ailment from which you can suffer. This jealousy can eat you out like a cancer. It can weigh you down and deplete you like a tuberculosis. Only you don't think of jealousy as a disease. You think of it as a well-justified emotion. But you have no realization of what it is doing to you. Now, long before it can maybe take you out of this life, this jealousy reduces your energy quotient so that other things no longer look good to you. You are tired all the time, having wasted your energy just in the process of being jealous. You have no energy, therefore, to do things to take your mind off of being jealous. And little by little, you just stew in your own juice. By degrees, this attitude has enfeebled you. It has vampirized your entire energy structure. Now, everyone has a few of these, but when people alternate from day to day between jealousy, fear, grief, anxiety, envy, ambition, avarice, prejudice, where all these patterns of complicated energy wasters will make a complete witch's brew within ourselves. Not to be surprised that we're tired all the time, that even the best tonic advertised on television doesn't seem to cure us. We have got to take hold of something of this nature. What does Western man have to take hold of this with? Supposing he admits to himself, yes, I am stupid. I'm doing all these things I shouldn't be doing. I know I shouldn't be jealous of people. I know I shouldn't be envious of the success of others. I know I shouldn't resent my in-laws. They're nice people. But I do. And no matter what I do, whether I affirm my love for them or I affirm my determination to get over it, I still feel just the way I did before. When I feel like disliking someone, I dislike them. Don't know anything else to do about it. So we try everything you can all think of. If they're religious people, maybe the family send them to the minister and have a long talk on the vice and horror of jealousy and how it might interfere with our ultimate rest in our heavenly home. We keep right on being jealous. At the moment, it is more fun to be jealous than it is to visualize the possibility of our heavenly home. And then there are so many other reasons why we may not make the heavenly home, but this is just one of a number of contributing causes. We have no answer. We can go under analysis for this. We can go to a psychologist who will ultimately become jealous of his money-making ability at our expense. We still will have the same attitude. Yet there must be some way of changing this. Occasionally we know it is changed. One way in which it is changed is through a tragedy of some kind. Occasionally jealousy works such a horrible misfortune upon us that we can no longer face it. We have to change because we have seen the horror of a terrible circumstance for which we are responsible. Another thing that helps sometimes is the fact that as energy becomes less, perhaps memory is less retentive. Sometimes memories of these things fade out along with other energy losses. But that's a slow, hard way to do it. Then suggests that there is a simpler way to do it. And that this great pattern of jealousies and of hates and pressures and arguments and prejudices, all these little tricks and habits that are so obnoxious to other people, attitudes that we keep on holding even when we know we are breaking the hearts of those nearest to us, there is a way to get out of these things. And there is a way to put our lives together on a more constructive basis. It all depends upon one rather simple realization. And if the individual isn't ready to come to that realization, then his difficulties arise from karmic roots within himself. No individual can get over a problem until he deserves to get over it. He must have done something, made some move, made some effort, by which he can honestly say that he has really tried to get out of a bad situation, particularly one involving his own temperament. He cannot go along hoping against hope that some pill will sometime be discovered which will cure a bad disposition. Any pill that will cure a bad disposition will also destroy the good disposition and leave the individual a non-entity, which is one cure for a bad disposition, unconsciousness. But there are ways in which we can do a little better. And the whole point of Zen philosophy from the beginning has been to get away from this idea that man is small and problems are big, that the individual is some kind of a creature that must struggle on and on through time and eternity, trying to cope with something like a streak of prejudice in his own nature. What is this streak of prejudice that an individual can fight it for 50 years and still have it? Where did this prejudice come from? Is it an entity of itself? Is it actually a fork-tailed demon of some kind? Is it an obsessing thing that possesses him? What is a nasty disposition? Is it something so big, so terrible, so formidable, that it looks like one of Homer's one-eyed Cyclops that can pick up mountains and throw them? What is this peculiar canker in ourselves, which we find it utterly impossible to cope with? What is this dispositional situation that is so much bigger than we are that we have to go along and endure it the rest of our lives? Zen says that this tremendous problem just simply is nothing. That what we are really doing is bowing our lives down to phantoms. This attitude never was anything. This selfishness that we have, that has hurt us for a lifetime, actually isn't anything at all. It is just one point of view that we have made up out of our own way of life. This attitude began in us, not somewhere else. It is never for a moment capable of enduring any longer than we permit it to. Here we have 10,000 attitudes working through our natures all the time, and when we go to sleep at night, they all stop. Because while we are unconscious, we're not nursing them. While we are not aware of them, they do not exist. The moment we wake up in the morning, we carefully go through the ledger, gather them all up, and start again. We don't want to be regarded as having a tendency to forget even one of our faults. We must take good care of all of them. But there is no problem here, actually. The only realization that is necessary in this whole problem is for man to know that all of his attitudes are the products of himself. They are not something so big and tremendous. They are merely born in his own nature. They are no more important to him than any other thought he thinks. They are simply the sequences of negative thoughts or negative emotions which he is using to excuse himself from something. He is using these negative things and holding on to them simply because in some way they comfort him. They excuse him. They make it possible for him to justify his own inadequacy. If he couldn't think of some excuse for being inadequate, he would have to face the fact, and that is what he doesn't want to do. So it's so much easier to feel that other people have all the breaks, that he has been slighted, that his abilities have not been recognized, that his life has been more difficult than anyone else's. All these things add up to explanations and excuses why the individual has not carried his own personal life with dignity. So all this evasion problem is simply a way of anesthetizing the true basic character of the person. So Zen says to this man, go out in a garden by the side of a little waterfall where some carp are swimming about, a pool, a little stone lantern on the side of a hillock, a beautiful little pine tree, twisted and gnarled, struggling for survival on a little ragged cliff, stone walks and bridges, an old bench, a rustic house, a tea garden. Go there, sit down very quietly, and just let go of all of the tomfoolery that you have been clinging to so desperately. Instead of saying to yourself, life is a bore, or I am inadequate, or I can't face the problem, just be very quiet and begin to absorb into yourself the peace of nature. Little by little, as you sit there in this garden, and most of these gardens are meditation gardens, and that is one of the great joys and charms of them. As you sit there, things will begin to let down inside of yourself. You look around, and everywhere you look, there is beauty. Everywhere you look, there is harmony. And if there is any evidence of man at all in this little pattern of things, it is the kindly evidence of someone who has thoughtfully and lovingly worked with that garden. By degrees, the tensions relax, and you say to yourself, my, that's a beautiful old stone lantern with a moss on it. It really is something that, a thing of real joy and beauty. Now, this is just an observation, but while you're making that observation, you're not sorry for yourself. By degrees, in the quietude of this, the kind of a garden, the quiet meditation, you begin to come closer to another kind of existence. The existence which, according to Zen, is the only one that is worth cultivating. This existence has nothing to do, really, with work or play or family or friends or anything. It is just a restatement of the fact the individual is alive. And being alive has a life to use. As he sits there quietly, he sees the golden carp in the pool flash into the air with a wonderful flash of golden copper light. This is life. The opening flower is life. Everywhere there is this quiet motion of things to grow, to flower, and to be fruitful. And these are the directives. These are the great purposes of life. And by this little garden pool, the individual can simply let go temporarily of a man-made existence and try to experience something of the total internal of himself. If he goes to a garden like this, maybe once or twice a week for 6 months, he will almost certainly, in the end, discover within himself a garden, a zone of tranquility within his own nature. He will begin to experience, for example, the need for that garden. He will experience the need to continually replenish the garden image within himself. He will find that he is also thirsty for peace as well as for power. In a little time, he discovers that there is an area within his own nature which is at peace. And that if he can give this area an opportunity to express itself, he can achieve a peacefulness of his own life that can be of the greatest value and importance to him. So out of his little Zen meditation, there comes only one perhaps important realization. And that is that there is not only turmoil in him, but there is also peace within himself. that deeper than the turmoil, deeper than the artificial patterns which he builds up, there is in every human being the great love of peace, the love of beauty, the love of tranquility. And the garden becomes the symbol of this. It is something to draw this out of man, whereas the busy road where the cars flash by, this releases from man to the level of his confusion, the garden, the level of his peace. Under the pressure of the daily business of living, he is constantly manifesting into expression energy to be used merely for survival, to drive that long, hard road on the freeway, to meet the competition of the day, is always pouring out reserve and holding a defensive attitude of self-protection. In the garden, he doesn't have to. He suddenly realizes that what he feeds, he has, and that just as surely as he must accept pressure and sublimate it within himself, so also he must provide his life with non-pressured areas, so that he has some way of reconstructing his own inner convictions of what is right. Zen also, by meditation, leads to this concept of direct action. Zen, by removing from the attitude of the individual all mental and emotional overtones to action, permits the action to be performed with a minimum of stress of any kind to the individual or anyone else. Action becomes complicated because of our own emotional and mental reactions. But suppose instead of catering to these, we say to ourselves, this is next, therefore this we do, and that is all there is to it. Simplify the problem. Get away forever from this peculiar build-up. We all know the dental build-up, where the individual making an appointment with his dentist 3 days ahead suffers a little more each day as the appointment gets closer. By the time the appointment is really due, most people would cancel it if it wasn't for the fact they'd have to pay for the time. Many actually go to the dentist office and find that the toothache has stopped. Any excuse or any evasion, because they have built up a long anticipatory struggle with the dentist. This was more strenuous, of course, in the old days, when dentistry was a little more rugged than it is today. But still we do the same thing. If anything is going to happen a few days ahead, we begin to dramatize it, build it up, worry about it, think about it, so that we have used a tremendous amount of energy anticipating an event. For this reason, most people find that if there is something difficult to be done, it is best to make the appointment for the most immediate time possible. Do it immediately, before you have a chance to dramatize the situation in yourself. Do the same thing in your daily work and living. But pick out the most difficult project of the day and do it immediately the day begins. Select the time yourself, if it's possible, in which to assail the major difficulty of the moment. If there is a chore, for example, that you would like to put off more than anything else, some little peculiar situation that you have gradually built a complex against, do it first thing in the morning, before you have really a chance to get any more energy behind that complex. If there are things that you feel a special resentment toward, solve them as quickly as you can. Never wait. And then move into the day with this Zen-like attitude that there is only the simple matter of achievement. Beginners. They couldn't stand the possibility of singing a sour note in public. it would be a mortal injury to their pride. The performance had to be perfect. They were not perfect. It couldn't be. So they were in trouble from the beginning. So self-consciousness in this case was just pride, just the unwillingness to face the fact that they were only beginners and would have to make mistakes. Another common cause of this type of attitude, of course, also, is the desperate desire to excel quickly or to improve as rapidly as possible. This has resulted in a general decline in music, for no longer will any student take the time to become a good artist. If he can't sing the first 3 lessons and do opera by the 5th, he changes teachers. He just will not do what the great singers did, and that is do scales for 5 years before they even sang one song. They won't do this anymore. They haven't time. Everything is in a hurry. Haste and tension go together. The tense person in singing becomes locked. The diaphragm is locked. The throat squeezes. Every part of the system is tied up in a tangle. So the singer, finding themselves blocked, comes to the conclusion that the only answer is to force through. So the voice comes out like a bellow. There is no tone, there is no quality, there is just a deadly struggle between the voice and the throat. This is due completely to the inability of the person to relax. They therefore turn in a miserable performance, are broken-hearted, and very often quite sick as a result of this struggle. If they had relaxed, if they had done the best they could and known that it wasn't going to be perfect, if they had even gone so far as to assume that their teacher was a kindly person, that the teacher knew their problem, therefore they didn't have to play games with the teacher. The same in life. If people would only assume that the world is more or less basically kindly, and it is very kindly to beginners if these beginners are cheerful and kindly themselves, so that there's no real need to have this terrible struggle in life. All these different forms of tension can be overcome by a little bit of the real Zen attitude. Zen takes the attitude that the thing done perfectly is the thing that is done with no interference from the person. Down inside of us there is an autonomic structure, a process of subconscious directives. These subconscious directives, once they know what is expected of them, have an astonishing skill in fulfilling what is needed. Most inefficiency is due to the mind interfering with the natural instincts and impulses of the person. We could solve a great many problems better than we do if we would just stop thinking about them. The thinking is what gets us into trouble. It's the same with a pianist working on his instrument. He will never play well until he completely eliminates his hands. His hands simply cease to exist at a certain point in his practicing. Mental impulse is interpreted without any conscious effort, far more rapidly than the mind could possibly convey it, as far as a conscious process is concerned. He cannot play as long as his mind has to tell his fingers what note to hit. But when this becomes subconscious, the fingers hit the right note. In Japan, there is this old temple, the Sanju Sangendo in Kyoto, which was originally an archery field. And along the eaved wall of this temple, which is 400 feet in length, was the ancient archery range that was used by the samurai and the great and skillful archers of Japan for annual competition. This competition was a very difficult thing because the eaves were very overhanging. The platform was comparatively low upon which the foundation of the building stood, so that the archer firing his 400-foot target could not arch his arrow up. It would stick in the eaves. He had to shoot 400 feet almost on a straight line. And according to the competition, he had to shoot very rapidly with a very large bow. And to make it still more complicated, the Japanese archer usually shoots his bow sitting down. Now, this is enough to cause a lot of trouble on a 400-foot target. Yet the winner of one of these contests fired 11,000 arrows in 24 hours, of which 9,000 hit the target. This would be more than we could even accomplish. It would be incredible to our thinking. Now, the only way in which he could do that was that he was an archery master. The only way he could be a master was to study with an archery master who was Zen. It was the only way it could possibly be done. And this master would finally teach him that perfect archery was a complete relaxation of the whole nature. And several who have studied with these masters report that occasionally they got an arrow right. Now, of course, only in target practice. One of them explained it very simply. He said that after shooting badly, many, many arrows, he said, something suddenly happened as the result of long practice. I drew the arrow from the quiver, I put it to the bow, I raised the bow as though in a trance. There was absolutely no effort. I couldn't even know that my hand was pulling the string. And because there was no effort of any kind to pull the string much further than I ever had in my life. Everything was done as though in a trance. All of a sudden, let go of the arrow. A long, difficult shot and a complete bullseye. Couldn't do it again. It was months before the shot could be repeated. For once, the person had done it right. Had suddenly discovered that this very difficult bow draw, for it's a very powerful bow and a very long shot, required no energy at all. The individual didn't know he had actually drawn the bow as far as energy was concerned. For the first time he had drawn the arrow to the head. When he was thinking about it, he couldn't begin to do this. Something happened. Everything fitted together to form the perfect shot. And then this carries on into other and all activities of life. The individual can reach a point in which whatever his problem may be, whatever his needs may be, whatever his responsibilities may be, they can be handled with effortless certainty. They can be handled without any anxiety or worry. If this man in this particular shot had said, I hope I will hit the bullseye, he never would have. If he had feared he would not hit the bullseye, he never would have. If he was nervous because he didn't want to make a shot that was bad before his teacher, he would never have hit the bullseye. If he had known perhaps another man was watching him, waiting to try to outdo him, he would never have hit the bullseye. But in those moments he knew none of these things, although they might all have been occurring. There was only the perfect integration of himself. Now, Western people have really no idea what this means. They try to say that it is negative, but that archer shot was not negative. They try to say that it represents a loss of all the progress we have made. It really doesn't at all. What it really stands for is the survival of the individual in the midst of his own progress. If he doesn't survive, what does progress mean? Progress cannot always be fighting ourselves, struggling against the weaknesses of our own lives. It can never be a continuation to eternity of our fears and doubts about providence, about the future, about war and peace. There has to be something more important than this. And if more people would try to understand some of these principles, life would be a lot easier for most people. So try this concept of the Zen archery principle in handling the day's work. One thing you can do in thinking through this a little is to look back over your own life somewhat and realize that there have been days when you have handled your problems pretty well. What was peculiar about those days? Why were they better than other days? Well, you say to yourself, perhaps I got up feeling a little better that morning, more optimistic, something went a little better, or had some good news that made it easier. But whatever it is, try to find out what it was that made some days bright and other days not bright, when life conditions were just about the same. And I think we'll find, as we do a little research, largely our own attitudes. We got up one morning, we got a little irritated when we got up. Some small problem got us started off the wrong way. From that time, the whole day was no good. Another day, we sort of got up a little bit better. The day was better. So if we find the morning starting with what looks to be a negative problem, then we've got to stop that problem right then and there before it has a chance to wreck the day. This business of going on and soaking in this problem is of no value to anyone. We have to conserve our energy, we have to integrate as much as we can, and we have to try to use the most constructive attitudes that we possess to direct us throughout every day of living. The best government is when the wisest rules all men. The best government in ourselves is when the wisest part of ourselves is in authority. And the wisest part of ourselves is very often a very simple part. The gentle part, the kindly part, the relaxed part. In this same problem of trying to find some type of detached tranquility in which to work, Zen goes into other areas of thinking also. Zen is always close to the idea of the hobby. The hobby or the avocation is a great help because it breaks the continuity of thought. And when we break a negative chain of thought, we have weakened it. And wherever we can break a negative chain, by doing something else, we should do so. The person who is mentally, emotionally inclined to be very sick is nearly always an individual who has no hobbies, no outlets, no avocational interests, no contrasts. They are living along one pattern exclusively. Now, another thing that Zen warns us about is this deadly seriousness of life. Zen is a religion. It is also a philosophy. And no one can deny that Zen is serious business. Yet Zen is forever warning the individual against the seriousness of his own thinking. Zen is forever telling him that seriousness can kill him without accomplishing any good whatsoever. Let us consider for a moment the seriousness of some people who have come to the conclusion that the good life must be a painfully thoughtful existence all the time. These individuals become afraid that anything that is not serious will be used against them in the cosmos. Such is not the case at all. Zen art is forever reminding us of the vanity of this serious, dignified attitude. The Zen monk has a dignity about him, but it is utterly uncultivated. He is never trying to be dignified. What he is striving for most of all is to be free from himself, to be free entirely from any measure of his own attitude, so that we mustn't forget that one of our troubles in modern Western living is the fact that we take things with great seriousness, when actually most of the things we are most concerned about have very little substance to them. Let the Zen with his koan, therefore, take some situation as, what about the man who is deadly afraid that unless he is serious, he is going to hazard his own salvation? That the only way he can hope to ultimately become all-wise and all-good is to dispose of all frivolity and settle down to the murderous process of self-improvement. Zen has the perfect answer for this, namely that the perfect individual, by perfection, having entered the Mahaparinirvana, does not know whether he is perfect or not, and nobody cares. Perfection is not what he is seeking for, because Zen does not believe in perfect people. Zen does not believe that the individual can make salvation a job. He doesn't think of life in that way at all. He is not hoping for heaven. He is not trying to evade hell. These things are only terms which he believes some people use to frighten themselves with. To Zen, the victory is not this desperate seriousness. The victory is the simple process of being able to sit down in the garden and be one with life. To be one with things that man has nothing to do with, primarily. And in order to do this, the individual must get over within himself the things which he has had to do with, and become one again with a kind of a universal pattern of things. This universal pattern answers a lot of questions. It answers them in such a large, deep way that you can't entirely evade the consequences. The old Zen monk, for instance, sitting quietly by the side of his little waterfall, watching the fish jump in the pool, he says to himself, "Today I am here, but tomorrow the stone is empty. Where am I?" That's the question. And he will say, well, probably if I am not here, I won't know where I am. And where I am isn't going to be very important. If I have disappeared from this sphere of life, I have also left behind all the things that have to do with this sphere of life. But if there's any memory that I want to take out of this world, perhaps the most beautiful memory would be the waterfall. The very gentle afternoon sun and bringing out the morning glories, or bringing out all the wonderful flowers that you see. What else is there? My relatives? They're not really relatives. They're souls like I am, here, gone, no one knows where. Business? Don't worry about it. There will always be someone who will want to take it, and who will also come in the end to sit in a garden and figure out how to get rid of it. And being a kindly, good-natured man, this man will leave it to his sons after he has found it was unendurable for himself, and will consider that he is doing them a favor. These things happen. There are wars, bombs. Terrible things devastate the universe. But there is either the garden, and the old monk sitting there, no garden, no monk. All gone. For what? All the more reason why this strange, fantastic agitation over things that don't mean anything is a total waste of time. There are only certain things that man can do. He can give happiness and bring smiles to other people if he can. These are nice, pleasant ways to live. He can write good poems. He can paint a picture. He can sing a song. He can make a garden. He can tell stories to his grandchildren. He can bring up his family as well as he can. He can add his prayers to those at the altar of the temple. Give a few coins to rebuild the temple when this one is gone, and go to sleep in the little cemetery behind. These things are very simple. If we'll let them be simple, we can have a quiet, rather childlike existence. We can enjoy things. We can read good books. We can have friends. We will have no envious neighbors. And if something comes along and these things are no longer possible, we'll adjust to what does come without fear, without anxiety, without misgiving, because we live in a universal law. The law works. There's no need to worry about these things, because anything that is worth worrying about belongs to a plan so lawful that no worry is necessary. All these are attitudes of fears and hatreds and all this. They're simply moods of our own ignorance, habits that we have allowed to take hold of us, habits by which we hurt and injure and destroy ourselves, habits by which we waste energy which could be used to paint a beautiful picture, habits that shorten life and burden us with sickness, habits that make us lonely old ages, because those around us do not want to endure these difficulties any longer. Everything is actually very simple until we make it complicated. So for people who are under tension and stress and things of that nature, they may as well face it. They're going to be under stress until they relax, until they are able to see through all of these weird patterns which are the cause of their stress. This great demand for things that we can't afford, keeping up with this and trying to get that. This desperate desire for something only to awaken after we have it and find that it's not very desirable after all, and we have to desire something else. All experiences we should learn. Experiences that should tell us that there is no place in a good life for bad thoughts. And thoughts either are creative and constructive and optimistic and friendly and charitable, or else they're no good. Nature has ways of making us pay for our mistakes. And from the beginning of recorded history, nature has penalized the destructive thinker. We suspect this. But like the alcoholic, we do not know how to break the habit. We find we have learned to depend so much upon false thinking and feeling to give reason for life that we forget the fact that these things have only give reason for a bad life. They have never really justified a good life. Now, when we try to break the alcohol habit, by Alcoholics Anonymous or something of that time, we have a little fight on our hands. And I talked to an alcoholic not long ago who made it. And he said, well, it was something like this. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lost my car. I lost all my friends. I lost the respect of my children. I lost my job. I was headed for Skid Row. There was nothing more to lose. And I suddenly said to myself, how much more stupid can you get? How much more do you want to try to lose? When all that is necessary is to decide quietly in yourself that you've lost enough and that you are not going to allow a bottle to destroy you. And when I decided, I quit. There was no more problem. But he said I had to reach a point where there was nothing more I could lose. I had to reach an absolute desperation. And then I discovered that I could have quit in the first place if I wanted to. But I never wanted to as long as I could drink and still have enough to get by on. But this is the same thing that happens to a great many other people. While we can hold a home together or have the partial respect of our friends, we don't want to change our ways. We want to keep right on the lines of least resistance. So in the bad disposition, or the energy-destroying forces of wrong attitude, wrong thought and emotion, we're in the same problem. We usually have to wait until we have a mental breakdown or a complete nervous breakdown, or until we completely destroy our homes or lose our business or get into a hopeless mess before we decide in ourselves that it's time to do something different. And very often then we are so befuddled that we only blame other people and go on until it is hopeless. But at any moment we can change these patterns. And I cannot too strongly recommend that every individual who has a destructive habit pattern, which is using up energy, should say to himself, energy is much more than money in the bank. Energy is not only life, but it is the denominator of the kind of life that I'm going to live. If I abuse energy, I'm going to live, if I live at all, miserably. I'm going to have less and less joy, less and less production, less and less of everything valuable to the degree that I allow wrong intensities to govern me. They won't kill me like a bullet. They will cause a slow death, a death in which everything that is good dies first. And perhaps the individual lingers on, friendless and alone, because they have alienated everyone. The habit must be broken. And Western man is wrong in assuming that these habits are right. Man is wrong in assuming that he must be selfish. He is wrong in assuming that he has the right to make other people miserable. He is wrong in assuming that he must avenge himself for all real or imaginary injuries. He has finally to come to the simple realization that every destructive attitude that he holds is as poison to him as deadly nightshade, and that it will ultimately destroy his life and his happiness. If he will finally straighten these things out, he will see how much more energy he has. Tests have shown that it takes several times the energy to scowl that it takes to smile. And have you noticed that most sleeping people smile? Our natural tendency is to smile. The contented baby smiles. Old people, in the quiet evening of life, have a kind of smile on their faces. And many, many times the dead smile. Smiling seems to be quite natural. And it takes a lot of energy to get a grumpy look. You really have to cultivate it. And you don't like the looks of it when you do, when you frighten children. Actually, the simple, childlike quality of expecting good, looking for good, believing in good, and returning good for anything that happens to you is the most powerful defense mechanism that we have. It is the one attitude which makes life best for us and those around us. The only people who will be offended by our happiness are the ones who want to make us unhappy. And the only way we can really evade them and bring them to justice is to simply not be unhappy. That will make them miserable. But they have no right to try to make us miserable. Relaxation is no energy wasted brooding or mooding on anything. Oh, this is so very good. Well, we have people come in to us quite frequently with many problems of one kind or another. We had one in for a while years ago at about a 15-year record for self-destruction. This individual had gone through an unpleasant emotional experience. They had lost their home, according to their point of view at least, through the horrible scheming of another person. Having gone through this experience, which subjectively I suspect they richly deserved, because they were born home spoilers themselves, this individual settled down to 15 years of self-pity. All the trimmings were present. One was extravagance. Having secured a fairly substantial alimony, the person attempted to get out of their difficulty by spending money. They also then discovered that by spending enough money they could have a lot of hangers-on who despised them but would still hang around to get their share of the small change. This went on for years. There was never at any time any constructive effort to cope with this situation, and after a length of several years, alcoholism set in. The individual decided to try to drink themselves to death, all the time blaming this other person for all of this misfortune, blaming the other person for the fact that the one who was or believed themselves to be aggrieved had no strength of character to meet a problem with. It went on and on and on until the person became mentally ill. And as most of these stories begin with self-pity, this one also ended in a mental institution. This person was not really in a bad way. They were talented, but they wouldn't use their talents. They had some fair attractiveness, but they refused to be attractive. They had very good education, but they would make no use of it. The only thing they could do was to brood upon the fact that they had lost somebody's affection. Well, it's too bad. But it certainly is no excuse for going into a complete rot as a result. I talked to this person on a number of occasions. They admitted they were wrong, but they couldn't do anything about it. They felt like falling to pieces, so they fell apart. This has been Western man's solution to his problem for ages. It's just keep on doing whatever he felt like doing. If he felt like conquering the world, we had a Caesar, an Alexander, a Napoleon, or a Hitler. These people did as they pleased, regardless of who it hurt or how much. And we have assumed that this is the only way to get along in this world. And as long as we have this attitude, I'm afraid internationally and nationally we're going to be in serious trouble. This is not the answer. The answer that every individual must face is the answer of making out of himself a powerful, constructive force for the leadership of his own life. But we cannot keep on going as we are now without ultimately deteriorating to a dangerous degree. We have to take hold of these situations. Zen begins with self-discipline. Zen takes the attitude that there is never one moment in the life of the individual when he is not in control of himself if he wants to be. There is never one time in an individual's life when he cannot help self-pity. There is never one moment in his existence while he has to be selfish. There is not one moment when he has to be envious, or has to hate, or has to gossip. These are not necessary things. They are simply weaknesses. The individual who cannot get over gossiping may just as well admit that he has an incurable habit, the same as the alcoholic has one. And like the alcoholic, there's never a moment when he can't get over it. But he doesn't know it, or won't believe it, or won't try. If we are going to use what energies we have to unfold our lives and our world, we've got to begin to build these patterns of usage by which energy is directed constantly toward the end which we really want to attain. One way I think that would always help everyone in connection with these problems is to set aside a few minutes every day for a meeting with the steering committee. And that steering committee is yourself. You have over 40 faculties within you, which bring in various testimonies, mostly conflicting, like the members of a hopeless board of directors. I believe it was Albert Hubbard that said on one occasion, a board of directors is a group of people that takes 10 times as long to accomplish anything as one person would take to do it alone. But that's one of our problems. We have all these faculties within our own natures. Each of these faculties has its voice. We must have a Senate. We must have a House of Representatives or a cabinet or a government. But we must settle down once, maybe every day, for a few minutes to take care of some pressing legislations that are in great need of being accomplished. Every day we have a right to sit down and quietly survey ourselves. Find out what at the moment is giving us trouble. When we think of other people, always bear in mind that it is not other people that are causing trouble. It is our inability to cope with other people that causes trouble. If we are having difficulty with someone, what is the attitude that would cure that difficulty? Now, we don't think of compromise. We don't think of the individual agreeing with someone who is wrong. What is the correct attitude with which to meet the challenge, perhaps of a basic misunderstanding? Think it through. Quietly, peacefully, and with relaxation of mind and emotions, examine the facts. The moment you become fact-conscious, most of your problems will dissolve. Emotion and thought are fact destroyers. It's strange to think of thoughts as destroyers of truths, but they are. Our thoughts become merely eye servants of our own opinions. What we call a thought is nothing but an opinion used to defend some attitude of our own. Get away from this. There is a simple answer to everything. Find it. There is a simple, natural, dignified, immediate way of solving problems. Seek that way. And dedicate every phase of life to solution of complication. Start no new project while old ones are unfinished. Do not try to avoid one situation by creating another to confuse it further. Solve the one. And always solve without hatred, without prejudice, without unhappiness. Always find that solution must bring with it complete peace. Nothing is solved unless it ends in a deep, happy feeling in yourself. A feeling of victory. A feeling that it is right. A feeling that something that is wrong has been taken away. A person who has been in poor health and is gradually recovering from an ailment may awaken one morning and suddenly, for the first time in months, feel alive. Suddenly he knows that he has had a victory over the ailment. He knows that in a mysterious way, health has reaffirmed itself in him. And there is a kind of strange feeling of well-being that accompanies this experience, this discovery. With solution, there is also this wonderful sense of well-being. There is the feeling that now this mystery is solved forever, that it will never arise again, that there can never be any mistakes of this kind repeated. And the only time when we can say that is when we have solved the thing in ourselves. Having this quiet peacefulness, we discover that we can do so much more. The hours that were spent struggling with these problems are now available for learning, for art, for music, for travel, for growth, for the development of the abilities of the individual. And if we can rescue 1/2 an hour from grudges and dedicate that half hour to growth, we will find that in 6 months, great changes will take place in our lives and attitudes. We have to make the step, however. And the one thing that Zen can tell us to help us to make this step is that what we are really worrying about is a dream. This step is not arming against an adversary. There isn't any adversary. This bad habit that we have been suffering with and struggling against for years is nothing but a form of self-hypnosis. It is an obsession that we have permitted to grow. It is a strange illusion from which we can awaken at any moment we want to. We have fashioned it. It has no life but the life of energy which we turn into it from our own supply. Turn off that energy. No longer energize negation, and it dies. And the energy which we have wasted on it is now available for progress. You cannot hate without energy. You cannot fear without energy. Cut off the energy. Refuse to allow negative things to be energized. When they arise, block them completely from your mind. When they try to insinuate themselves into your thinking, quietly deny them that right. Do not fight them. Simply refuse to accept them. Put in their place positive and constructive attitudes and things that need the doing. Now, this isn't a struggle that will take the rest of your life. Take an attitude that is troublesome to you and approach it systematically. Reduce the energy equivalent. Refuse to allow anything to add to that problem. Refuse to interpret any more trouble into that problem. Refuse to energize it by thinking or feeling about it. And in 3 months, the problem will die. If you will really do this. You don't have to fight it the rest of your life. Once you know your master, once you realize that this problem is only a fraud in your own thinking, you can conquer it. Because it has nothing in the form of magnitude or strength or size to prevent it from being conquered. This terrible thing is only a nightmare which is removed by the mere process of waking up. So against all negative attitudes, follow the Zen concept of just wake up. Wake up to this garden world with the pool, the stone lantern. Wake up to a strange world that is so full of gracious and beautiful things that there is no time, no energy, no need to waste one single moment in the contemplation of negation or destruction. If you will work with this problem, I think you will find that you will feel better, will solve problems, and have much more life and vitality with which to carry on new and better interests that you might like to develop. Well, I guess our time is up, so we thank you for being with us this evening. Abandonment of self to an energy outburst. Energy is the thing upon which all must be motivated, or by which it must be fueled. Man's supply of energy is therefore really the most priceless thing that he has. As he wastes energy, he begins to experience the lack of it, and finds exhaustion, fatigue creeping in on him. He finds that his interests in life become less keen, and little by little, from lack of energy, all purpose collapses as far as his psychology is concerned. So we have to conserve energy. On the Western side of things, we measure achievement by energy expenditure. We put a pound of energy behind something, then we have a pound of achievement. We put 100 pounds of energy, we have 100 pounds of achievement. It's all energy. We think of the amount of stress as indicating the activity of the individual. This activity, however, may be nothing more than a kind of meaningless confusion. In the Zen thinking, energy must be conserved. The problem is to achieve the greatest amount of result with the least expenditure of energy. We know, for example, in the old days when the American Indian runners carried messages across this country, that it was necessary for them to achieve a certain pacing. They still do it in the reservations of the Southwest. An American Indian can take a kind of dog trot. He will go no faster and no slower. And on this trotting pace, he can accomplish a prodigious amount of travel. He can go for hours, apparently, without fatigue. He can outdistance those who run and hasten and hurry by just keeping up this peculiar rhythmic trot. He has learned just exactly how rapidly this trot should be geared so far as he is concerned. It differs with everyone. He knows his pace, he keeps it. And there are cases where Indians have kept this trot without really pausing at all for 12, 14, 16 hours. Had they hurried, they could not possibly have done it. Their brother in the East, the old rickshaw, to escape further flogging, the horse would maybe get to the top of the difficult hill. And the driver was quite convinced that that's the way to treat a horse. But of course the horse didn't last very long. Very shortly, the horse was through as far as its usefulness was concerned, to say nothing of the unfair and terrible damage which we inflicted upon another living thing. There is no gain that we can learn that is permanent or valuable that arises from beating oneself beyond a certain rather limited degree. We are not supposed to be lazy, but we are not supposed to live constantly under tension. The Western man has tried this long enough. And incidentally, he has contributed a great deal to the tension of all other peoples and nations. Probably a good part of the world would be happier than it is today if there had never been a Western civilization, because it was so geared to ambition, to conquest, to the extension of commerce and industry, to the rather ruthless colonization of primitive peoples. But this vast program of success at all costs has not only complicated our lives, but hangs heavy over us at the moment, as other nations are beginning to reach that degree of strength in which they can show their resentment for the ill treatment that Western peoples have given them in the past. So I think about all that this unreasonable ambition has resulted in is sickness, death, and hate. It has brought with it very little that we can say has truly advanced the course of our destiny. But we have created our own patterns of what we consider to be advancement. And we are still struggling with the idea that the more contrivances we can get into orbit, the more advanced we are. Actually, one of these days, the traffic congestion up there will be worse than it is here. And still we will not be very advanced, because this has nothing to do with essential progress. In the East, men have tried to solve this pressure problem. They've had pressures too. Probably not nearly as great as ours, nor as continuous. But they've had to work with the pressure problem, and it has become more essential as a problem ever since the East and West began to mingle their resources. Zen takes the attitude that pressure is not in any basic sense the key to success. Pressure is an individual bestowing upon himself a powerful stimulant, which is not really a tonic or a food, but merely a stimulation. The ambitions of Western peoples are not advancing the total character of the individual or the total good of Western culture. These ambitions are simply false stimulants. They are stimulants which cause the individual to develop all kinds of strange personality defects, very much as extreme alcoholism not only weakens character, but reveals inherent weaknesses to a most unfortunate degree. So we have to begin to estimate the difference between strength and mere inebriation or stimulation of a false nature. Zen takes the ground that the only way in which you can accomplish a great deal without hurting yourself and without hurting other people is to move from a kind of effortlessness within yourself. The moment you become dramatically aggressive, you also become offensive. The aggressive person is hurting other people, interfering with their rights, damaging their prospects, and to a measure annoying them and destroying their peace of mind. It is not on such a ground of mutual annoyances that progress can be achieved. And what appears to be progress, again, is only a kind of acidity, a psychic toxin, which is mistaken for a legitimate vitality. You can intoxicate a structure, particularly glandular, in the human body, and make it seem to work more rapidly and more successfully than is really the case. But this so-called overfunction is not a proof of strength, but a proof of the weakness of the gland, which is showing a kind of toxic exhaustion and is not actually in a healthy state at all. Zen would like to take the ground that man's success in life is due to the conservation of resources and not the abandonment. Western psychology has more or less taken the attitude that it is essential to the psychic integration of Western man for him to be under a condition of more or less constant tension. It is assumed that without pressure the individual will fall apart. We are held together by not only the pressures of our own personalities, but the pressures of our desires, our ambitions, and our attitudes. It is taken for granted that if the individual was not constantly striving after something, he would vegetate. He would cease to develop the resources which we like to associate with the dynamic personality. We like to point out also that Western civilization is a monument to the accomplishment of pressures. If it had not been for a constant pattern of affliction, war, strife, the pressure of situations and circumstances, it is assumed that we would all be back in the Stone Age. Well, we can build a pretty strong case for pressure. We can build a great deal to support the idea that the ambitious man forges ahead in the world, and the person without ambition seldom, if ever, gets too far in the battle of life. Up to very recently, we could philosophize about all these problems. We could say of pressure that we can take it or leave it. But by degrees, many of the beliefs that we have held to be the basic truths of society have been shattered by circumstances which have demonstrated that there is something basically wrong with the concept of the pressured life. The individual may seemingly get a little further under extreme pressure, but he is a little like the old-fashioned horse that was attached to the beer truck back in those good old days of cobblestones and great dray horses pulling huge loads. And very often the load was more than the horse could take. So the driver would lash out with his whip and beat the horse unmercifully. And in a desperate effort, the driver, who has now disappeared, had this same prodigious power. Behind the staffs of his rickshaw, between them more likely, he was able to go on for hours at this dog trot. I remember many years ago, when there were still rickshaws in the area, a rickshaw driver who made a 40-mile round trip without stopping, dragging a load. But he would never go beyond a certain speed. He would never hurry. He would go along with a strange rhythmic trot. He was conserving energy. Now, in Zen, this idea is carried a step further. Every ounce of energy that we possess must be used. It must be used as wisely and sparingly as possible. Nature reconstructs our energy patterns to some degree, but if we exhaust them too much, nature cannot revive or replace this wasted energy as rapidly as we waste it. As a result, over a long period of time, our vital resources gradually decline. If, however, at all times in life, we try to use energy to the utmost, getting from every unit of energy all of the true usefulness that is possible, we will find that nature has rather wonderfully provided us with the fuel of life, by means of which we can accomplish most of the reasonable things that we desire. It will be obvious that work of all kinds is energy consuming. But today, work is far less a problem for Western man than at any other time in history. But as his hours shorten, it seems that his capacity shortens. The individual psychologically is more tired now after 7 days with 5 coffee breaks than he used to be when he worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. If he had to do the work that his grandfather did, he probably would collapse in his tracks. So what has he accomplished since the time of his grandfather? He has accomplished inability. He has accomplished the mysterious circumstance of not being able to do what his own forefathers did. Now, the answer was not merely that grandfather had better stamina. It was that grandfather was a better organized person.